Welcome everyone to episode 8 on the Prismatic Academy podcast, a place where we share stories, explore the vastness of human potential, and embrace our own unique abilities in becoming conscious co-creators. I'm so happy you're here. I'm Krissy Marie, and in this episode, I'll be sharing an interview I had with one badass boss lady I met here in San Diego. Her name is Heidi Hawkins, and her story is one that really touched me. It's very special in that it's raw and courageous and deliberate. And through her story, she not only just opens up this burst of a sense of real self-compassion and the cultivation of that energy when faced with challenges and adversity, but also Heidi serves as a really great example of what it looks like to make conscious choices and choosing you, yourself, your happiness, and your needs, even when the world can feel very frenetic and chaotic and even empty. A little about Heidi. She created, runs, builds, and manages 3 publications that are pure connection within communities. And her journey into greatness began with a path of adversity that she was more or less born into. And my admiration for her comes from seeing how she just does not settle for complacency. In this chat, she shares a lot of great insights about how she kept herself moving forward and how she kept her sense of self-awareness close to her core, as well as how she learned how to do that even when faced with fear. It's really incredible. Heidi, I think you're so awesome, and listeners, I can't wait for you to hear her story. So without any further ado, here is episode 8, The Conscious Choosing of You with Heidi Hawkins.
So if he runs over here, that's because he's ready to bark.
That's okay, Oscar. You can be on the podcast. Yeah. Okay. So warm-up question. What do you do to do something nice for yourself? Like, do you have a favorite guilty pleasure?
Oh my gosh.
When you just need to unwind, relax, and refocus?
Yeah, I remember when I was going through a ton of stuff, I actually created a list so I could sort of really be aware and present with what had me feel good. And so I remember a couple of those things were, like, the biggest thing that comes to mind is just taking a bath and literally just like you said, just this word conscious, like just being, like, creating an environment for myself that looked like turning candles on and having soft light that just, dances on the walls, and music that just, like, calms me, and smells, right? Like, appealing to all the senses. So light and sound and feeling and just getting into my body. That is probably the biggest way that I take care of myself. That and massages, like when I actually want to pay for something, paying for, actually creating an appointment and having and allowing someone else to take care of me, and just the receiving act of that, like just acknowledging that, like, we don't always have to do everything on our own. Like, you can actually just receive touch and, like, feel safe and, like, shut the mind off and just experience pleasure in the body.
Those are 2 of my favorite things too.
Oh my god,
like,
I think there must
taking
be
a bath
everyone's.
and a massage. Yeah, I think I would be a complete nutcase if I didn't have those 2 things in my life. Okay, what are you reading right now? I see you have a lot of books here.
Oh my gosh, actually, I just got this in, and I bought both the book Emergence by Derek Riddle. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And so I bought both the book and then the audiobook because I knew I was going to love this. And so I started listening to audiobook yesterday, and it's 7 Steps for Radical Life Change. And it's basically, it's about it's not like, so you see all these self-help books.
That's exactly what my bookshelf looks
God.
like.
These are actually, I love these because I don't really buy a lot of books anymore. I went through this huge stage where I was so hungry for knowledge. and kind of reconfiguring my mind because I was recognizing something wasn't working and I wanted to be responsible for it. And so, so this is sort of my, I don't know what the right word is, like homage or whatever, the sort of like a reminder of this stage in my life where I really was on this quest. And it's been like 10 years now, and that quest never ends, I've recognized, right? So I got someplace and I experienced transcendence through a dream, which I don't know if I'd ever told you about, but I can tell you a little bit more about that. But I experienced this sort of moment of enlightenment, like my mark of enlightenment. And then it was sort of fleeting and it just sort of disappears. And it's like, oh no.
Like, come back.
Come back. Come back.
So you're just being given a taster, and now you have to work for the rest of it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But even the taste, I mean, is such a gift, like to just get to a place where you know now, like you have the experience. It's sort of a knowing that you know that you're on your way to something, and then you experience it. And it's like, Mom, look, no arms, no hands, you know, like you're riding the bike and you feel that sense of balance.
Right.
And nobody could describe it. You could never read about balance, but if you just like experience it on this.
And nobody tells you about this before that, right?
No, yeah.
So it's a very fun discovery.
Yeah. So anyway, but this emergence book is the reason that this appealed to me. And I sort of made this purchase more recently was because it appealed to my understanding of this being this self-help addict almost, and the fact that quest is really not something that I have to continue seeking as much as just allowing myself to be in the experience of everything that I am now. So it's his talk and his conversation around it is all, it seems so far to be centered around this, you know, this allowing and accepting and being that doesn't look like so much thinking.
Right. Are there any key takeaways that you have so far that you find yourself already applying to your life?
I think it's just this simple reminder of just being okay with whatever's there and just loving
being where you're at.
Yeah, just loving where I'm at, like all of its messiness and however it comes up, and parts of myself that I used to, and I still do it. I mean, it never goes away. That's like the human like conditioning, right? It's just, but now I get to be actually practice. That's really the quest right now, is just practicing actually the journey of it, like the movement, the fluidity, the flow of it.
Right. Even in the chaos, there's beauty, so much beauty, and so much to learn in those spaces. I like how you use the word quest. So when did your quest begin? You said about 10 years ago. What prompted that?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I think my quest started longer before that. And I was always this kind of kid, right? I don't know, like sometimes, I wonder sometimes if some of us are planted with this like chip, you know, that's like missing from others, and some of us have, and I don't know, but for whatever reason, I'd always been the kind of kid that was really curious and always asking a lot of questions, probably too many questions. I still do it. People get annoyed. But I was just so curious to want to understand, and I was very sensitive. Like I just found myself, I don't know, just not accepting the status quo, even as a little girl, like, and kind of seeing how people would sort of sleepwalk through things, and I just didn't want to be like that, and I couldn't even be like that if I tried.
So you didn't like the formula set up by society, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I struggled with that too. I'm like, stop, like, but why? It's so boring.
Right. Yeah, it was almost like I saw something that wasn't working in my view, and I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I didn't like to be at the effect of it. Mm-hmm. And that was mostly because of it growing up in an environment with circumstances that and I really view now as being fortunate enough to be born into, because I see, you know, I just see other ways of living. And I think that really when you do have the fortune of having some sort of adversity happen, it really can be the biggest gift. And even though there's so much pain and suffering in it, but there can be there's so much contrast that's born out of that. So like if you experience this depth to life that looks like really hard and painful that wasn't there before, well, there's now this new level of darkness, like on that canvas, like there's a new level of black that didn't necessarily look so black before. But then when you put the white, you know, the light on that same canvas, now there's this contrast that really has you experience that light and the white.
You create depth.
Yeah, you create depth. Exactly. That's actually a really good, now you've got this bigger spectrum that looks, that you're just aware of. And so when the good stuff, like the normal stuff that maybe day to day you were just sort of taking for granted, it's like now you just are so, I just find myself so much more grateful for the normal everyday stuff. And I see the ability to thrive. Like I see the choice that I have to be able to thrive. But yeah.
It's a choice. So you feel more empowered.
Exactly. Yeah. There's not something driving me as much as now there's this freedom of choice and really a desire to thrive instead of just get by.
Right.
And get by is boring, you know, like
so
boring. So boring. It's so like I can never just do that. And that works for many and others. And in some ways, you know, it doesn't work for them, but they're comfortable in it. But I think that, you know, when you take the leap of faith, and so to answer your original question though, I mean, I think because of the circumstances that I was sort of born into.
Yeah, do you want to touch on that? Do
Yeah.
you want to like begin at the beginning so we can walk through your journey?
I mean, I feel like I could talk about it forever. So just essentially I was adopted with my fraternal twin sister when we were 1 year and 3 months old by a couple who consciously chose us. Like they knew about us specifically, and it was a private adoption, and they were both really excited about adopting us. And that came out of their desire to really have children. And mostly, looking back now, I recognize it was mostly my mother. And when I say my mother, I mean my adopted mother. Whenever I use that name, but when my mother was the one that was really driving that sort of I want children thing. And so apparently, within a month of them adopting us, they had conceived a little girl. Capri is her name, and there were many things that happened within that year. When I look back and I kind of ask questions as an adult now, I've asked, you know, what was going on at that time in their lives. So they adopted us. She became pregnant within a month of that, and we also moved to Iran because my adoptive father was in the military, and that's where he was being stationed. And my little sister Capri was born there, and then at that same time, right shortly after her birth, my mother's mother was not doing well physically, and she was getting older, and that was my mother's primary, most important relationship in her life was this relationship with her mom. And so she took all three of us, you know, had to leave him there, but she came back to the States, and we moved to Massachusetts, and we ended up staying, from what I learned later on, was probably for a couple years. We stayed there, and then during this time, because she's now with the 3 kids, and her mother's dying, and her husband's in another country, it occurred to him that he did not want to be married anymore. At some point, I don't know exactly when that all occurred, but I think that, you know, and when I look back with compassion, I mean, the poor guy, it's like the poor couple, right? They have like, they go from 0 kids to 3 children.
And a lot of chaos.
A lot of chaos, right? And life circumstances, and it just was this trying, true test of anyone's relationship. And and that relationship broke. And so all I know is that I grew up with my adoptive mother, my mother, and in Massachusetts, like I said, and I just remember, I have good memories. Like I have good memories of it, and for some, she'd always introduced my sisters, my twin sister and I, as these are my adoptive twins, Heidi and Holly, and this is my daughter Capri.
Oh.
And I never thought anything.
You had to categorize.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, and I'd never had a story around it. I didn't make it mean anything. Yeah. It was just a kid, and that was just the way it was, and it was true.
Yeah.
Right. There wasn't anything about it, but for whatever reason, there was that divide in her world, right? That she, wanted to make it clear to everyone that these are her adopted daughters, and so I don't know what that was all about for her. But I do know that over the years that there became this sort of resentment or the struggle that she had with my twin sister and I, where there was a definitive, this definitive line on how she treated us versus her birth daughter. Wow.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't necessarily have a story around it. It was just the way it was, but it just sort of got more and more, the contrast became more obvious.
Where you're becoming more conscious of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was probably around, I would say, 11, 12 years old when that started occurring, right? Yeah. So here you're talking about from birth and maybe around 11, 12, that was maybe maybe I created something around how that wasn't right or it was bad and that's when the struggling started to occur, and I who knows, I don't know, was I rebelling, speaking up about it? I just know that I was a very vocal kid, and so I do recall my sisters looking up to me, and even though I was 5 minutes younger than my twin sister, I acted as the oldest out of the three of us, and so all I know is that wasn't appreciated. That wasn't my voice, and having a voice wasn't appreciated
by your mother.
By my mother, yeah. And there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, mistreatment, neglect, things like that. And I only say that too because the state ended up getting involved eventually when it went to foster homes, But really, this most important time, this transition, the first sort of coming of age, the first massive breakdown and not feeling safe was when my mother came to me when I believe I was 14, and it was a week before I was supposed to start freshman year in high school. And she came to me, and I don't even remember it being in person. I just remember getting the news that I was to pack my things and that I was being moved somewhere else.
Wow.
And just me.
Just you.
Yeah, just me.
That was completely unexpected.
Yeah, I didn't see it coming. I didn't know, I didn't understand why I was being isolated. And yeah, so the plan that she had was that I was to move in with her sister, my aunt, and they were going to, it was supposed to be a temporary situation. And they thought, they had been sort of told that I was a troubled kid or something. So they were expecting this really troubled kid. And then over time, they were, and this was a totally different school. It was a very different environment. I kind of grew up in the suburbs a little bit, in this beach community. But now I was living in this other place where there were gangs and it was not the nicer side of town, and but my cousin, who was 4 years older than me when I was a freshman in that new school now, she was a senior, and she was beautiful, cheerleader, popular, most intelligent, what is it, the valedictorian, and so that was good, thank God. I had this great role model, a big sister, but anyway, over those next few months, I started to maybe feel a little bit more comfortable. I don't know. But then I was struggling because it was this new environment and I was uncomfortable. And
did you feel rejected from your family?
I always wonder what occurred in my head at that time. I would imagine, yeah. I mean, I would imagine that there was, and I'd already was adopted, right? So there might have been maybe, like, I didn't feel like I had a story about being adopted because it was always something I knew I was.
Yeah.
But then maybe at that moment, it was sort of like, oh my gosh, like, because I was noticing differences about being adopted, right? And the way she was treating, and then to be sort of like cast aside.
Yeah, almost like abandoned, basically,
yeah,
while you're struggling with your identity.
Exactly, right? And then the normal hormone issues, right, as a young girl. And like I did, you know, just expressing myself, learning to like have a voice and to be punished for that was the ultimate sort of crime in my world. And so for many years after that, I learned to just keep my mouth shut. I really did. I think that there was this choice that I made to like play it safe and to go under the radar and not stand out. And here I was, this like 5'10", you know, blonde girl in this like kind of this school with all these gangs and it was hard for me to go unnoticed. And so I learned for a long time to play small and really things continue to get a little bit worse after that. Right. So that was just the tip. That was just the first step. But then, you know, for the next 4 years, I essentially went through this series of moving every 3 to 6 months and becoming part of the foster care system. And the at that time in Massachusetts, you know, the state, they do everything possible to keep you together with your original family. So, so no matter what the neglect might look like, I mean, if you don't have broken bones and your parents aren't using drugs, I mean, they're going to like put you back together. I mean, they don't have place for you to go.
Right.
So everything is supposed to be temporary. And the social workers are completely maxed out and dealing with high volumes and really dysfunctional situations and messed up people. And so our case didn't look like really that bad. I mean, it was sort of looked very white collar. And so, but it was just very dysfunctional. I lived in the appearance of like, you know, at the time, like of a woman who really, you know, did her best on making it look like she was very successful and had it all together and but yet she was, you know, hurting on the inside and hadn't dealt with her stuff. So I think I just always knew that I didn't want to be like that, like to pretend that everything's okay. And so anyway, but yeah, I mean, it looked like, you know, just a lot of chaos and like I said, I mean, at the height of all of it, it was this experience of, okay, you know, you've got 30 minutes, like just being at home in a foster home and being told, okay, you've got 30 minutes, you know, put your stuff in a trash bag. We need to take you to a new home. And like that, I had to get used to that. And that was like normal to not get too comfortable. Like don't get too comfortable with where you live, or don't learn to count on anyone because they're going to pull the rug out from underneath you. Yeah.
You learned a lot of self-protection, survival stories very early.
Yeah, I did. And like, it probably looked, I mean, it felt like trauma, you know, like it was just, I think it just occurred once. Like, you know, we have like something like my mother, she took me out of the home once, right? And then you move back and things work out. But to have it occur over and over and over a course of, you know, 4 years into adulthood, which at that time, when you're 18, the state releases you to your own responsibility. And you literally, they don't give you anything. Like you graduated high school or you're 18, you are now on your own.
They don't give you any resources?
No, there's wow. I wasn't given any resources. And for
they don't
me,
even prepare you to take care of yourself.
No, there wasn't. And now, you know, I mean, now that I've moved around and I've gotten to look into that system a little bit more, there's programs that have been developed in other states and nonprofits that folks have stepped up. Yeah. But still, I mean, you're talking about like thousands and thousands of kids.
Well, you didn't have that available to you. So how did you deal with that once you turned 18?
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I became... You know, we all have a choice. There's that moment of recognizing that we can either, and many people don't recognize it. They just go into victim mode. I definitely did that. and I felt the experience of that, and I've dealt with the consequences of that, and how like so much lack of power I experienced in that space, and it just wasn't a place I wanted to hang out in. And even though I would go there because it's natural, I didn't want to keep entertaining it for like, and I mean, and we're talking, I mean, I did entertain it for months, and like there
like
was
feeling numb or just shutting
just
down.
numb, and like I can't even feel, I can't feel anything. I can't even speak up about what I need, or I have no one to reach out to. Literally,
just
even
getting
if I
through the
wanted,
day is an accomplishment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I ended up developing depression and anxiety as a natural result, right? And even in that, when I was 14, I remember, I have it in my journals. I have my journaling was like the thing that I learned. Like it was this healthy coping skill that I learned, and I really wish I remember how I just made the choice to start journaling. But it really became, even to this day, an outlet for me that helped me cope and to rely on myself and to kind of tap into my own inner guidance system, even though it freaking didn't feel like there was one there.
Right.
But I knew that there was something there because there was no other way to go. So I had to find something inside of me to rely on, because that was like that undercurrent that I had read and heard existed, but I didn't know. It was my life mission to find it and discover it, and to like know that like no matter what happens, no matter what someone does or says, or some sort of experience of the rug being pulled out from underneath me, that I could actually count on myself and not put the pressure on somebody else to have to figure something else out for me, because I was finding people couldn't do that for me.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of.
Well, you made the
lost.
choice not to be broken.
Yes, I made the choice to not be broken. Like there's this sort of like you're on the floor groveling, right? I mean, you're praying to something you have no idea if it even freaking exists, but you just know that you feel like you're dying, like your spirit is broken. You've lost all faith in humanity. No one's coming to save you.
You lose your lust for life too.
Yes, exactly. And
there's no motivation for tomorrow.
Yeah. Right. And so once I hit that space, and again, we're talking about like really young ages to like experience this, and like life gets really heavy really fast. And so I remember these sort of pearls of wisdom. I like that, actually. I haven't known how to phrase those, but these little pearls of wisdom would come into my mind and my heart in the quiet spaces. And I remember I wrote this down, and I never read it anywhere. It came to me, and it said, and this again, to give you a context, it occurred in the space of me feeling a lot of deep, deep sadness and a lot of anxiety and fear. And, where you can't even know it anymore. You start to experience it like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. And because your heart's beating fast, and you physically don't have the energy to get out of bed or to, try to even connect with the world. And so I remember, like I said, in that silence that I had, in that, this darkness, like we're talking about the light and the darkness, and these moments where I would have like that candle lit in the dark, and I'd be journaling and listening to some music. And I had this thing. It said, a feeling, if felt long enough, becomes a part of you. In time, it cannot be distinguished as a separate, but becomes unified as one with you. It is you. And that was when I was 14, that's what came to me. I don't even I never tried to think of it. I never said, oh, I'm going to try to come up with a way to express myself with this thing.
It gave me goosebumps.
Yes. And it was like this little download from the universe, from life force, from love, from light, anything. It was something in me that was being born as a recognition that we don't have to choose our identity. Like, I don't have to identify with my feelings of depression and anxiety as like, this is me, I need medication, what's wrong with me? Look at me, I'm such a victim with this experience, and there's something wrong with my body. No, it was literally because of the numbing effects of the circumstances. And that can look like the numbing effects of the suburban mom, like day to day, who's never really known like the deep depths, because she's just dancing in this space of not knowing what real light and love looks like and real dark. I mean, it's just sort of this avoidance.
Right. You're just staying content and complacent.
Yes. Yeah. Complacent. And it's
safe.
a slow, and it can look like a slow death instead of mine, which was like, bam, you're like, pack your stuff, we're taking you. And over and over and over again.
Yeah. So you chose not to be broken, and you went on from 18, you went into college. So did you carry any of what you were learning? Because you've obviously had to pick yourself up a couple times before you even got to that place.
Yeah, oh my God, I had to pick myself up every day.
And like life has a way of it just throws these things at you.
Yeah.
Especially around that young adult time, I feel.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when I went to college, because that was an important turning point for me, where I was now choosing my independence, right? Like independence was thrown upon me, and it's very healthy. Like I've recognized, independence of mind, heart, finances, everything, being responsible for each and every one of our own life results is just part of the rite of passage,
learning to be accountable for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so, whether it's thrown on you, like in my situation, or if it's bestowed upon you from loving parents who really know how to parent and recognize like, hey, we're going to teach you some tough love here. You have to, you need to be independent. And so that being said, I made the choice now to be independent by going to college. And it was never like, people have always said like, oh, it's for kids in foster homes, it's not normal for them to go away to college and like make something of themselves. They sort of become part of the system again.
Right.
And for some reason, I just had always had it in my heart, my mind, that I was going to be better than the situation. So I used all of the negative stuff, and I made the choice to use it to inspire me to be better, to not be like that, to not be those behaviors or to be those circumstances. And so I remember just, thinking, of course I'm going to college. Of course I'm going to, graduate, and it doesn't matter what comes my way. I'm going to make that happen. And that's where I felt, power in my life for the first time, right? Is when I made these choices to bravely step out onto like the edge of the cliff and have no idea if there's like something to protect me from the fall, but I wanted to experience flying, right? So it's like, so you step out, and I would have to, because it's literally like, there's no other choice. It's that or imminent death, like by just sitting in a box and like not achieving, not trying to do anything. And so it just became something that of course I was going to do. And
did your identity change at all around that time? Like, did you feel yourself, or did you feel yourself taking on this energy of, I am definitely not going to be like this?
Yeah,
like, did you share your story and your background when you were in college?
Yeah, even in high school, like I would share a lot. And I think because when I would share these circumstances, I've always kind of laughed about this, because I'm not going to lie. Like, I definitely used my story to like get more financial aid I found myself leveraging my story in a way that like I almost kind of felt icky about, because I was like, I recognized that when I told my story that it got me accolades, that people were like, wow, you're a survivor. You are inspiring. Like, how did you do that? And so I kept this story alive, and it's actually kind of gross in some ways, because like, especially in dating, I would talk about my story all the time, and like I kind of used it as a way of like testing men to see like, are they strong enough to handle this? Like, are they going to be freaked out,
or do they know what's in front of them?
Yeah, do they understand the woman that's sitting in front of them? Like, can they be with my power? Will they cast me out because they are intimidated by the strength that I know I have, and will that scare them? And honestly, it has scared
And of course
many, and not all of them, but it has scared people, and then I've had to deal with the heartache around that because and the reason I say this too is that there is a way to be that doesn't look like trying to test someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can be responsible for the fact that that not everyone has had these experiences, and that doesn't make them better or worse, or me better than them or stronger than them, but I almost, like I said, I went through this stage for a long time where I used that story, and I don't know, used it, shared it, whatever. I would share it very openly, and there was a cost to that. I got something from it, which was, like I said, I got to be admired, but there was also this separation that would occur where I felt like I'm never going to be like any of them. Like I'm never going to relate to someone who's like hasn't had like massive shit happen to them.
Right.
So
you're almost like you're establishing your identity
in my separation.
The circles. Yeah.
Yeah, my separation. And that would lead to this anxiety and this depression even more, right? So even though on the outside I could appear as like this strong woman, I would be on the inside. I knew that I was like so alone and so sad and like feeling victimized by having experienced such adversity at such a young age. And so I'm still learning how to like approach that and not be like still be powerful, but have it look like compassion and not trying to be in someone's face.
Right.
And
what helped me with that, because I struggled with a lot of the things that you're saying, is when you're sharing your story, you're actually putting the power into other people to choose. Like, am I for you or am I not?
Right.
And you want people to make that choice, because I feel like when you're trying to be for everybody and you're forcing a compatibility, it only creates more chaos. Like, you guys are only going to get hurt. So even though, because we're human and we like to be liked, and I know that I'm a sucker for affection. Like, I love to be loved.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Right. And so, like, if I'm sharing my story and what I do with somebody and they're like, I don't know if this is for me, it took me a long time to get to this place, but I learned, you know what, that's okay. You know, like, it's okay it's not that they don't accept me, it's just, the energy's not there for that.
Yeah.
So, after college, well, what did you graduate with? What was your degree?
So I should say, I went through 4 years of college over the course of 7 years at 3 different schools. Yeah. So,
I had a similar story.
Yeah. So, and then everyone would be like, oh, you're not going to make it, like, if you take a year off. And it really was, again, me just trying to find my way and experience homelessness in that space, and like, again, more and more adversity in the space of just trying to get my degree.
Yeah. Like, why does this have to be so hard?
Yeah, why does it have to be so hard? I just want to get my degree.
Right.
And so, so I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Speech and Marketing and Communications. Marketing Communications, I can't remember what it was. Marketing something and Communications from Emerson College in Boston.
How did you handle the adversity in college? Did you build up a support system? What got you through it?
Honestly, I mean, it was a lot of the same moving around, like having to, because there wasn't the support there. I mean, even like when you're in college and you're a foster kid, you don't have parents to go and spend the summer with, and, you know, or Christmas break with. Like, you literally, like, and I would have to be sort of at the whim of like, okay, I can't afford, you know, to go back this next semester, or hey, I've changed my degree. Like, you know, like most college kids, like, oh, I think I want to do this now. Like, it's sort of like this unfolding kept occurring, but I had no guidance, like nobody, no adults to really guide me in any of it. So, gosh, it's like when I think back to all that stuff, I'm like, no wonder why I'm like, am the way I am.
Yeah, because now you're very organized. You have a plan. You know,
I mean, well, maybe.
I feel like you anticipate very well.
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, I still don't know what I don't know around a lot of stuff, but I probably, yeah, maybe to someone else it looks like that because I have so much life experience of like not knowing what the heck I'm doing, and you have to figure it out, and literally everything's like thrown up in the air, and you're just trying to find the pieces so that you can put them together and build something that you can stand on. And so versus it feeling like quicksand.
So when did that moment of transcendence come for you? Was it close to the time where you graduated?
No, it was actually that when I graduated. So I had met a boy. I'll say a boy because we were both very young. But I had met someone, and I was very fortunate to have in those earlier stages have aligned with, let's say, probably two significant relationships, like two boys, that are now men, but two boys that really were my rocks. They weren't very ambitious, but they had like the biggest of hearts and just so loved and adored me, and like were just trustworthy and like really simple, like in a good way. I needed simple. And I don't mean that even to make it them sound like they're not like simple-minded or anything like that. There was just this simplicity and this simplicity to who they were, and probably still are. I don't. They're both married now and all that, but there was this simplicity that they gave me and I think I gave them a level of complexity that probably balanced it. That's probably why they were drawn to me, is that I gave them some level of excitement and all of that. But yeah, I married one, right? So, and he and I met when I was in my last year of college, and I just remember just feeling so safe with him, like that deep sigh of like, oh, I can count on this guy. Like, thank God, he's my hero. And poor guy didn't want like all of this responsibility, but he really was saving me. Like, I look back and he really did save me, and he saved me so much, or maybe I gave him such an experience of him feeling so powerful, of being able to really contribute to another human being who was so vulnerable and scared, and he wanted to give me the world. And so he proposed. He bought a ring like after a few months of dating, and he was so committed that he proposed to me at 5 months of dating. And what happened was this just like tough lesson that I had been conditioned, right? So I had learned to keep my mouth shut for over the years. And
is Oscar snoring into the microphone?
He's like on my lap. So he proposed, right? And what that looked like was Christmas Eve. I went to Virginia to meet, to be with his family. I had met them just one brief time, maybe a month prior for Thanksgiving. And they had invited me to be the first person to open a Christmas gift on Christmas Eve. And so I was like, okay, I'll play along. And so I opened the Christmas present and pulled out this big teddy bear, and his mom and his brother was sitting there very, looking at me, just looking at me. And nobody was, I was like, oh, thanks, thanks for the bear. And nobody was really kind of like responding. Like I just had this experience that they were very intense. Like, I'm like, gosh, these people are really intense. Like, what? Like, and so anyway, apparently there was a box on the teddy bear's lap, and part of their plan as a family for Matthew proposing to me was that I would see this box on this teddy bear's lap. And so anyway, so they said, oh, there's a box in the bottom of this smaller box. So I pulled this out, and my boyfriend at the time, Matthew, was sitting there kind of lounging on the couch, with his arm up and his legs crossed, and he's sort of very relaxed. And I pull out this jewelry box, and it says something like, in every thought of my heart, I am yours, something sweet like that. And so I opened the box, and there's a wedding ring or engagement ring. And Matthew is sitting there still with his arm on the couch and his legs crossed, and he doesn't get up and do anything. He's 23, right? So apparently I found out later on that he saw plenty of movies where women jump for joy as soon as they get a wedding ring or get proposed to or see a ring, a diamond ring.
Right.
He didn't even do anything at that point. He just is expecting me to be like elated that this is what I've been waiting my entire life for. No, I was not that person.
You didn't even expect that.
I didn't even, wasn't looking for it. I think I had said something in a moment of like sweet embrace, you know, at the 1.5 months into dating, where I said something like, I could picture marrying you someday. Mm-hmm. That's the only indication or any discussion we'd ever had. And it was just young, naive, innocent love. And I found myself with the experience of something very different than that. And that's where any adversity, I now had a choice, and I wasn't aware of how I was conditioned. And so I made a choice, and I said, Matthew, what is this ring doing in here? And his mom and his brother are looking at me. His brother's got a camera on me. His mom's, I don't even know his mom, you know, she's mm-hmm. staring at me. I'm like, you know, the vessel for her future grandchildren. I mean, so she's got a lot riding on this, you know, and
yeah, a lot of expectations.
A lot of expectations, yes. And I'm just trying to get through college. Like I have like 6 or 7 months left till graduation at this mm-hmm. point. And anyway, so he said, will you marry me? And he said, he again had his arm back on the couch, and I just meekly said like, yes. You know, yes. Mm. I remember just saying it like really awkward, like not sure, like it was awkward. And all I remember is they all get up and jump for joy. They go grab champagne. There's pictures of me with the champagne. I still have this picture. Yeah. And I look back at that like moment of such innocence in who I was. And I think like this like moment that I'm talking about as far as what you asked of enlightenment, it started with that moment, because that was where I had the ability to say no or to speak up and say something else, but I didn't. Right. So
would you even have known what that would have looked like at the time?
I just remember not being ready. I didn't know, you know, I wasn't ready. So, but I didn't know what ready looked like. Right. So I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Why wouldn't I want to marry this person? So really, again, as far as what existed in time and space is that they get up and get the champagne. There's a picture taken. I'm wearing this ring. I said yes, meekly, unsure. I go downstairs into his bedroom in his mom's home, right? And I was crying. Mm-hmm. And he comes down and he says, what's wrong? And that's where I had the moment to speak up. And all I could muster, all I knew how to say was, I don't know what's wrong, but I feel like you're being selfish. And I just remember saying that. And I remember him ignoring it, him hugging me more. He got kind of like, he didn't want to hear it. And because he loved me and he didn't know what to do. Right. And so that looked like the next year, we by the way, I got swept up. We went, you know, in a way, we all got put in the car. We're like going to this other Christmas party that in this neighborhood, and it's all of these people I don't know, and they're like, they all knew about it. It was like, oh, you're married. Like, what are you going to wear? When are you going to get married? Like all these questions. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. And so I just pretended like, okay, I'm in this, I guess. I said yes. So a year later, I finished school. He and I met in Boston, and I was going to college at the time. And so he continued, like, we continued dating, and now we're engaged. And I remember when we walked down the aisle, I was so numb. Like, I remember graduating, I was so numb. And then, like, moving to Virginia, I was so numb. We were going to be with his parents and his family, and I was like, oh, good, I'll have a family. So moved to Virginia in the middle of nowhere. I felt like it was, Madison, Virginia, middle of nowhere compared to Boston. And I'm just like in the country. These are farm people, it's very simple. Like everyone has lived there their entire life. They don't travel anywhere. It's just like what you do. And here I was like in this environment that felt like another foster home. I was literally being swept up and nobody was listening to really what I wanted. And I didn't even know how to say what I wanted. So I walking down the aisle, and like I said, it had just been this constant experience of being numb. Every weekend I would deal with deep, deep depression. I mean, really. Mm-hmm. Throughout the week I was okay because I had a place to go, I had work to do, I had a job, but I was really, in the weekends, I was super depressed. And I didn't understand why. It was, again, like this, it was almost like all of this deep sadness that I hadn't really dealt with or had support around was just like, it's like...
It comes up in those quiet spaces when you're not busy. Yeah.
I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't fake it. I know his family was like, what's wrong with her, And I just like had to keep pretending like everything was okay. But because again, I didn't know what was wrong. And
because you're supposed to like want what you have.
Yeah,
right?
I'm supposed to this guy is great. Like, who wouldn't want to marry him? He's like this great guy. He's loving and supportive and attractive and athletic. And
so you internalize that and you're like, what's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? And so I just said, something's just wrong with me. I'll deal with it. So I didn't take whatever he had going on. By the way, he had stuff that he needed to be responsible for that unfolded over the next 6 years while we were together. But I knew that, but I didn't, again, it was just sort of like, oh, I'll be responsible for my own stuff. So I'm like deep in the work, journaling, like self-discovery. But he was just not into any of that. He wasn't, he was just like happy with his life. He found a woman that was very driven and, passionate. And like he explained that was kind of like a tornado, like a storm. And he loved the storm. But I walked down the aisle and I remember I never forgave myself for years and years and years. It's only been really more recently that I forgave myself for this. But I remember walking down the aisle and I said to myself, I can get out of this. And like said the vows till death do us part, through love and through like health and sickness or whatever, all the vows. And I was a complete fraud and I knew it. And I was trapped. And so I didn't have any self-respect. I didn't have any integrity, no honor. I wasn't happy. I was miserable. And this poor person, I felt like I had deceived him. Whether that's true or not is another whole conversation. Sure. I mean, I did speak up, but he didn't listen, and he saw signs too, right?
Mm-hmm. So you're put into this environment where it's almost like you're doing what you've always known to do, like just putting one foot in front of the other. And also now you have this new situation where these expectations are being put on you to where, a lot of what you're doing is just to fit the status quo, to fit the mold, to be the people pleaser, to not upset anybody, right? Because you care about them.
Yeah, and my life, what's the most important part in all of this is that the roof over my head, counted on me being this way.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot riding on
yeah, we're not talking about like...
So it was also survival.
It was survival.
Yeah. So when did you make that step towards your own happiness?
When I started getting really honest about my stuff, and I took a course. There's many things that wake us up out there, and I had taken this transformational experiential learning seminar that was 3 days long, and it was called Landmark Education. And there's, like I said, that, and then I've seen other courses that offer these kinds of experiences. But I was willing to step into that, and I took this course, and it just woke me up. And I started to step into that darkness and like hold my flashlight. Like I knew I had a flashlight somewhere, and I knew that I had like this little like light inside of me. And And I just took that into that space, and I just took responsibility for who I have been that created the results I was having that looked like depression and anxiety and having one foot out the door and in my marriage and all of the things that look nasty and that, you know, anyone would say, who are you? Like, why did you, you know, could judge me on? I bravely stepped into that space and took responsibility.
While you were married?
While I was married, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was like in that space, I kept saying, this is what I need from you. This is what I need. So I was speaking up. And and I had been doing that for a few years with him around our finances, because we're talking about survival, right? This is a woman who's like knows how to step up. And so he allowed me to do that. I was the breadwinner. I was the one handling the finances because he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't really care about making more money or taking vacations or saving money. His parents were going to help him out, or his family. And that was just his conditioning. So I knew that for me, that made me feel more masculine. It made me feel like I was like a ball buster. I didn't feel like I could rest and be provided and taken care of and receive. I had never even known how to do those things, but I knew that this masculine mode that I was in was not what felt natural to me, or what I wanted. So I made the courageous move to get separated and to create separate living spaces and really just like, I didn't know what that looked like. If it looked like divorce, I really honestly didn't have divorce in my world. Of course, that's a natural possibility for getting separated. But in my world, getting separated was, I'm going to work on myself. You work on yourself. We'll come back together. And that's when he met someone, and he's been married to that person ever since. And that was my moment of breaking big time, because I now
Do you feel like it backfired on you?
Well, it was like a necessary evil. Yeah. I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was stepping into what felt good for me and in alignment.
You're stepping into your integrity.
But I had him as my safety net. I had this man that loved and adored me and believed in me, wanted to be with me, and he was my family, and he was my support, and he was my knight in shining armor at one point in my life. And now he just made the choice to move on and give that to someone else. I literally now, any experience of safety that he had provided me for the first time in my life was gone again. So I now had to I shook my world. Again, it brought up all my stuff. And in that, like I said, I had this moment where I had been doing all these self-help books. All of this was born out of that. And journaling, going to church, taking classes. I mean, I could not get enough. I was so hungry for taking control back of my life again.
Yeah. Because I've had a moment like that too, where you literally go after everything. So every book, every healer, you soak up information and knowledge about the universe so quickly. Was there anything during that experience what worked for you and what didn't work for you?
Yeah, I think when I hear you say that, because there's such a gift in us seeking knowledge and light and love, whether it's through books or podcasts or seminars or church or music or walking out in nature. I mean, anything that has you feel good from this sort of natural derivative, right? Because lately this whole other conversation about drugs and alcohol has come up for me because I've seen people coping with that, and that has them feel good. And there's nothing right or wrong around it. It's just that there is a cost at when we choose to align with a stimulant, something that we press a button and we get this reward chemically induced. And so anyway, so I just, for whatever reason, chose not to do those things. I just saw that it was almost more adversity to on the other end of that elatedness that someone might experience from doing those things. And I should admit, I probably was drinking a little too much, like most 20-something-year-olds do for a period of time. So I was like, oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't work.
Yeah, so you knew that right away.
I knew that right away.
That just didn't work for you. Yeah. So what did work
for you? But what worked is that I think it was honestly it was it was almost like everything that came together, like I said, all the books, the seminars, everything. It was just, there was this awakening in me that honestly occurred. Like I said, it was at night. I'd never shared this before, I don't think.
No.
But okay, so I was sleeping one night. I was, at this point I had been separated. And maybe, I don't even know if I was divorced at that point. I could do the math. But either way, I was on my own. I was living in my house by myself. I was sleeping alone, sleeping a lot, by the way, and just trying to heal. And there was this moment after probably the darkest of darks, again with my ex-husband meeting this other woman, where I had this epiphany, and I was sleeping, like I said, and I had this vision of this Y in the shape of a Y. It wasn't actually the letter Y, but it was just the shape of a Y. And all of these concepts, words, it just looked like words plugging themselves in. And this again is while I'm sleeping. They're plugging themselves in, and I just remember it was sort of this this recognition in me of the way my brain was sorting all of this knowledge that I had been taking in for years and years and years. It was coming together in this sort of congruent picture in my mind. And I started to recognize, like, these words started to look like love and hate, light and dark, good and bad. It was all the spectrum.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that before. It was the entire spectrum.
Oh, so they weren't just polarized words? It was the polarized came out first, but then the spectrum that filled in, and it was all these, again, from reading Wayne Dyer and taking these seminars, going to church, studying religion, being out in nature, exercise, whatever, like all of these things I started to have this awareness that they were all the same thing, that people were just using different ways to describe them. And so, because I never bought into any one specific way of any of it, I always was like open to many different ways of expressing that. Or you take little parts from a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I wanted to make it my own. And so, and as I'm sleeping, I started to like wake up, and I was like, man, I'm onto something. Like I remember having the thought of, okay, already, I'll wake up and write it down. Like it wouldn't leave me alone. It had me by its grips. And I woke up, grabbed my journal from the side, from my nightstand where I always kept it. And I just immediately started capturing what I remembered and what was going through my mind. And I started obviously engaging with it in an intelligent way at this point because I'm awake. And it was probably around, sunrise around this time. And I would always write the date on the piece of paper, in the journal entry. And like I said, my experience of writing this all down was just this moment of enlightenment. And like, I was like, holy crap, I get it. I get the design of life. Like, I get the game. Like, I kind of got the 10,000 foot overview, but it was my it was sort of, my interpretation, it was my acknowledgement of it all existing in the same space. I didn't have to have this ideology or this belief over here or be separate from each other, because it never seemed right to me. It never felt like it worked. There was not a flow to that. I didn't like the boxes. Like I wanted to be, I was really flowing in between all these states. But long story short, we can make this mean whatever we want it to mean. I don't know. I still don't know. But that day happened to be Easter morning. And I'll never forget it. I was writing the date down because it sort of it occurred to me like, oh, it's this Sunday. It's Easter morning. And I was just like, I remember getting chills because there was something about the symbolic nature of like Easter and sort of this rebirth and this separation,
like death of who you were.
Yes, separation from like the physical, like any ties that like kept me in my body that were not really who I was, And so I wrote this date down, and I just, every single Easter now, and you know, and I have to ask myself, like, what does that mean? Like, how do you not believe in Jesus Christ? Like, how do you deny that this man like, existed? I still don't know, but I do know for me that there was something that was occurring on that specific day, and if it's an accident, let it be an accident. I don't know. I'm going to take it as my own opportunity to align with something that...
Well, it was like your birthday. It was your awakening
really
day.
My birthday. I know. And my birthday was actually like 10 days later. Like I'm, you know, born in April. So
no, I totally get that. I know that every time I have, because I learn a lot through my dreams too. But yeah, every time I have like a transcendent experience, I remember the day and it makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, this is the anniversary of when I learned about this.
Yes.
So after your transcendent experience, and you're stepping into integrity and becoming more in alignment with who you really are, you seem to, is that when you really started getting into your adventures? Because I know that you're really big into mountaineering. Like how many mountains have you climbed so far? And what got you into that?
Yeah,
because you do that by yourself, right? Like you just go off and climb a mountain.
Well, I mean, you can sign up to be part of guide services, right?
Sure.
So you're not just out there all on your own. But yes, there's.
But nobody's like holding your hand, like dragging you to do it. You're like, I want to do this.
I know. I think that over time, once I started building a foundation of being responsible for my own finances and my own happiness, right? I really spent a lot of time on my own for quite a while after that, because I was committed to seeking out if I could experience love in the world without a man in my world. And that was really, it was never meant to be a permanent plan. I've recognized that now, that I have to recreate something else to have that man be part of that. Right. But I really was committed to, just wanting to be like, find love in other ways. And so I started to get really curious about the things that had me feel good, and one of them was being physically active. And as I was able to calm my mind and my heart with this seeking stage, I then found myself filled up enough to have like a lot of energy towards physically exerting myself. And so I liked the idea of challenging myself and putting myself in situations that had me touch up against my vulnerability and my weakness. And there's nothing like being in your body and physically like running a marathon or climbing a mountain for 18 hours or
crawling across like a 20-foot crevasse.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, that was 8 feet, but yeah, I mean, or anything
like that was the one that you knew of.
Yes. Yeah, and all of it was like what happened then is it started to become, and even to this day, as like this 41-year-old woman now, it's like I find myself like starting businesses and whether and taking courageous, bold moves that have me be in touch and never lose sight of the struggle. And I really think that's kind of this. It's a really interesting balancing act to stay connected to struggle,
or to know where you've been and to know that you've overcome it.
Yeah, and just to kind of remind ourselves that like that the beauty of overcoming something can't really be achieved fully without the struggle.
Right.
So like I've noticed that I've put myself in situations where I'm like almost inducing a little bit of struggle, and and again I have to be curious about like, okay, how else am I doing that, like especially with my love life. But what has me stay connected to that like all of the goodies that come from overcoming something.
Right. I like to say that if you're comfortable, you're not growing. So you're constantly putting yourself in a state of growth. Yeah, I love that. So how did you get to that place? Because obviously through the separation, I went through something very similar where I slept a lot. I drank a lot. I couldn't pull myself out of bed. And I was in this deep, dark depression to where it got to the point where I recognized that, one, I was tired of being tired, but two, I just need to make the small choices, like the small decisions to get better. So did you have a similar experience to that, and what were the choices that you made?
Yeah, it looked like, and that's a part of that drawing, by the way. It was like these little steps that had me recognize that these are little daily choices.
Yeah, the drawing from your dream.
Yeah. And so it was like, it looked like, how do I practice this? Staying in the light, like this side of the drawing that looked like light and love and living a life of meaning and purpose. And there were practices that I captured again through practice and reading and whatever. Was it looked like for me exercise, journaling, meditating, rest, like getting a full night's sleep, making sure my sleeping environment is healthy and ideal for what I know I need. Yeah. For me, nutrition is huge, like making sure that I'm feeding my body and loving my body by like intentionally being aware of like things that are just not good for it or that make me feel bad, right? Like too much sugar, too much fat, too much carbs. Like, so I just started to get, again, more aware of what was having me feel good and then integrating those things. And it's a constant practice. I mean, it's not like I'm literally eating perfect every day, meditating every day, exercising every day. Like I fall off course all the time, especially when something comes up.
But you pay attention to what you need right now.
Yeah, and I know what I need. So at least it's in my awareness, and I can choose. And for me to not choose or to not do that, not align with it, is, it looks sort of, I should just say that to choose to align with it looks like loving myself.
Right.
So
what does it look like when you fall out of alignment? Like, how do you know when it's time to put yourself back on course?
Oh my gosh. It looks like exhaustion.
Yeah.
For me, it's physical exhaustion.
Or when something is just too hard to do, or
it
shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, when it's a sort of an overall state of being, like where day to day I'll notice like, oh, I'm really just kind of not motivated today, or I'm not inspired. Yeah. I'm not feeling, alive in my body. And what I've noticed again is if I can stay on top of those 5 basics, and I call them this, like I kind of identify them too. It's, if I can remember, 1 is physical activity, like making sure you move your body. Number 2, nutrition, making sure you're, just eating every few hours or whatever your body needs to sustain your blood sugar and to have you feel energy and to support muscle, eating enough protein and carbs to sustain energy and the exercise. 3, rest. Am I sleeping enough at night? 4, water. Am I getting enough fluid? And then the last thing that I've said is intimacy. And that can look like, it doesn't have to look like physical intimacy with a man, because some of us don't have that in our world at this moment. So that can look like emotional intimacy. Do I have support groups, and am I creating emotional intimacy with my friends, and maybe even in the process of dating men? Like, am I creating emotional intimacy first with them as I discover who they are and how I feel around them? So again, exercise, rest, nutrition, water, and intimacy. If I've got those 5 things in alignment, the rest, everything else will kind of be born out of that.
Yeah.
Those, whenever I feel off, I ask myself, like, let's get back to basics, Heidi. Like, what's off here?
Or what's missing. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because you have a couple of publications. So what made you want to start those? What are some of the struggles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, when I got my degree, right, I started going down a path that looked like making money. And so I started, I ended up working in more of the sales path, and that looked like working with medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, IT consulting company. And I, in all of this, like being responsible for being in alignment with things that provided my life meaning and purpose, I realized that those things didn't fit Although I love the business and the hustle of it. I like the self-starter aspect of it.
Right.
I knew how to do those things. I knew from my survivor days of how to make something from nothing. So I was really good with that, and I liked that, actually. Reminds me of who I am and what I'm capable of. And so I had the opportunity to work with this publishing company, and it just was something that I learned about, and I said, you know what, that actually is something that I really like, the idea of like working for myself, or, you know, and again, being really responsible for the results, like financially. And so I started working with a company that, as an independent contractor, to basically create community. And what that looked like is working with neighborhoods, a couple of different neighborhoods. First, it was in Kirkland, Washington. And I essentially created a neighborhood newsletter. And the warm, fuzzy side of that was that I got to be at the source of building community and helping neighbors get to know each other. And it was the complete antithesis of what I grew up in, right? I didn't grow up in an environment that looked like knowing my neighbors or celebrating the Joneses down the street. I mean, or the simple things, like just shining a light on and celebrating family. So I liked that I could bring that element into my life. And like I said, be at the source of creating it instead of waiting for it to happen in some way. Mm-hmm. And then I also like the business aspect of like the accomplishment and the sense of achievement that I got out of, you know, again, starting a business from the ground up, and, you know, and dealing with the failure and the success, and knowing both sides of those coins, and sometimes it gets the better of me, because I have dealt with like a very successful business where I built it up to 6 figures and sold it for 6 figures. And then most recently in the last year, still working with that company, moving to a place that I absolutely love, San Diego, and sort of accidentally or unknowingly choosing a niche that doesn't really necessarily work with our model all the time, which is, again, we work with affluent neighborhoods, because if you're going to work with a neighborhood, you're going to also be responsible for the finances that go into that mm-hmm. product. You have to align with what the market wants, and there are businesses who they are only interested in spending money on where they feel like they're getting a return on investment.
Right.
So
you need to make your business sustainable.
Yes, exactly. And mm-hmm. so I hadn't done that, and there's a bunch of reasons and story I could go into about that, and it doesn't even matter. But now I know, you know, again, I know both sides of failure and success, and now I get to choose something different. So now I'm starting a third publication, mm-hmm. and I'm really excited about it. I have 2 months of making it happen, and I'm using every single resource that I have internally to make that happen. And I really do see myself having the life of my dreams, living in the place that I love. And literally, I feel like it's so easy and it's so right in my grasp. And it's just a few months away. And
like you could almost touch it.
I can almost touch it. Yeah. And I'm very impatient.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with that. But I'm, and the fear that comes up with it, and the anxiety that comes up with it. But I'm tapping into that soft spot in the rest, you know, in the exhale that looks like trusting and faith. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of this beautiful dance between faith and trust and action. Mm-hmm. So it's literally like faith and trust in action mm-hmm. is like my mantra right now.
Yeah, I love that. So what books, because you have a really beautiful bookshelf right mm-hmm. here, which ones, if you had to pick 1 or 2 of them, which ones really helped you the most?
Oh my gosh. You know, I mean, well, I love the first book that I happened upon that I felt like really woke me up, and for whatever reason, it The Unmistakable Touch of Grace. I can't remember her first name off the top of my head, but anyway, but Unmistakable Touch of Grace, and her last name is Richardson.
Yeah, we'll look it up.
Yeah, look it up, and it's mm-hmm. and it was about this acknowledgement again, or recognition about what's this word grace mean. Like I was kind of curious because I've heard it used in a religious sense, didn't know what all of that meant, but I was curious, and it jumped out at me sort of in the bookstore at the time, and it was about how circumstances happen, right? Where life is going to happen, everything. So we can choose to look at it a couple of different ways. We can look at it as the very fact that this could really likely be true is that we're all sort of bumping into each other. It's all sort of, we're just crashing into each other, and it's all like, looks like chaos, and there's no purpose to any of it or any meaning. And like I said, that is very well could be true. All I know though, when I try that view on, is that my life kind of sucks. Like life feels empty and it doesn't work, and I feel like jumping. Like it doesn't inspire me. It doesn't have me feel connected. Yeah. So if I have a choice, why not choose something else? So that's what's beautiful about being human, right? Is we can choose something else. So the other option she provides, this other view, is that what if you actually try on that life happens for a reason, that the people that come into your life, that there's no mistakes, that everything does have a purpose. And your only job is to stay curious about that and stay open and receptive and like just to trust it. And so again, that could very well be true too. And really at the end of the day, we as the creator get to decide what is true. So when I tried that view on, I found that like I did feel connected and I did feel more inspired, and so I started to create meaning in my home. Like I started to look at the items that I had and the things I surrounded myself, and to really just be conscious of like symbols and things, and whatever reminded me of what I was about, I was going to choose that one. So I chose to live a life with meaning. The second book, like I said, is, I really do feel like, well, I would say Emergence. I already talked about, but I haven't finished it, so I'm not going. So far I love it. But the second book that has really made an impact on me is David Data's Way of the Superior Man, and this is a book that is written for men by a man. And for some reason, I just dig it. Like I get it. It's like my world. And I realized that he talks about masculine and feminine energy, and he does it in a way that, like, if you can get by the creepy voice, like if you watch him on YouTube, which like, and the oversized shirts, and like it's outdated and the videography is awful.
Like just listen to the message.
Just listen to the words. This man is a genius, and it really is this beautiful expression of, like I said, this masculine and feminine energy, and you can really see it at play in so many areas. Like especially within myself, I recognize that because of the way I had grown up, and many of us women like grow up, or and even men, it depends, whatever. But I grew up in a very masculine energy environment where it was about survival and about like independence and being strong, and don't show your feelings, and don't be all like warm and touchy, warm and fuzzy, creative. It was about just getting things done. And I realized that doesn't work. It doesn't work in relationships with men. It's men do not want to date men. So, and the kind of man, right? The kind of man that's very masculine that I would want to date, he wouldn't want to date a woman that's like a man. So what I've recognized is that I've learned to soften and to be more in this receptive mode and this feeling space, and to really feel in my body and really tap into all the amazing beauty that is that feminine essence that we are as women, and to recognize that the polars exist for a reason, that we cannot magnetize the opposite if we are not really sitting in our feminine. That being said, the women that are very feminine their whole lives, they've always been taken care of, they've always received, daddy always took care of them, life always took care of them, whatever. And now they're getting this rude awakening of like what it's like to actually have to be in your masculine, to step into the space of being financially responsible, for having to make decisions that are hard, to, work on your body. It's not all going to like just happen naturally. That there's the just being aware that these polars exist, and that when you seek to marry that masculine and feminine inside of yourself first before trying to marry that with outside of you, that there's something that looks like the 21st century, that looks like the day and age that men and women live in now, and the some of this stuff that we're all equal, but yet, yes, we're all equal. And at the same time, let's also recognize that we are still women and that we are still men, and that there is this natural default, and that it is our responsibility to be in that space and that energy so that we can bring that out in the other.
Right. And we also get to play in both energies. And I love that you read a book that was more about masculine energy, but showed you how to be more feminine.
Oh my God, it showed me way more how to be feminine, because I saw myself in so much of the masculine. And he was coaching men on how to bring out your masculinity so that the woman could be more feminine.
Oh,
and I was like, oh my gosh. So by me recognizing that, I was like, wow, like by me practicing being those things that he was talking about as feminine. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about feminine qualities in men, by the way. Mm-hmm. But by him coaching men on bringing out their masculinity and their direction, their decisiveness, this like strength, this unwavering, stability that the female, like feminine, wants so badly, that by them aligning with that more, that allows the kind of real feminine woman that they really want to show up and be that too.
Yeah. Interesting.
It just as the polar exists for the women, right? I mean, like I can't, if I'm not, I notice that when I'm more feminine and I am receiving and I'm practicing, because I default more to the masculine side, but my natural essence is feminine, but I've been conditioned masculine, right? So when I default to that and I align to it, there's something so beautiful, and I see these masculine men step into that space and they thrive. Yeah. And I'm still practicing. I'm still playing with it. They're, whatever. But it's fun. It's more fun, and I recognize that there's something to it that's really just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love that. So if you had to give your 25-year-old self, or maybe even 30-year-old self, one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say to be patient with yourself and to trust the unfolding and stay in action. That's really it. Just to trust yourself, have compassion for where you're at, express where you're at, and it's all okay. You're exactly where you're supposed to be.
I love that. Okay, so how can people find out more about you and things that you're doing?
I'm on Facebook. It's just Heidi Hawkins, and I live in San Diego. And I think I haven't done a search for Heidi Hawkins in San Diego, but I think I'm the only one. I don't know. And then I'm on LinkedIn. Like I said, I publish a magazine that I'm launching right now called Real Producers of Greater San Diego, or Greater San Diego's Real Producers Magazine. That's me. And then I also have an Instagram that is just Heidi, HEIDI.S as in Schofield, .Hawkins, which is HAWKINS.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heidi. I loved hearing your story. Thanks. And I didn't want to interrupt, but at so many times I just wanted to jump out like, oh my God, me too. Like that happened too. And I don't know what it is, but for some reason I feel like I know that my story isn't unique. But it feels that way, like you feel like, oh, nobody else goes through life this way, or nobody experiences depression that way, or nobody regrets the choice they made when they said yes to get married, So it's really cool to hear that connection and to know that you've taken steps that people can model after. To get themselves out of that place.
I know, and I think that the
I'm
opposite.
still going through that.
Right, and I always say that the opposite of depression is expression.
Mm.
So just remembering, and anxiety, when we've experienced anxiety, that we have to ask ourselves, what are we anticipating in the future is going to be worse than the present moment? So those two things, like, because I deal with that stuff like sadness or disappointment and anxiousness, it's all something we all deal with. And so again, just by expressing and sharing yourself and what you're doing with the podcast and just sharing people's stories, you never know who's going to like touch or wake up, or right. They're just going to be like, oh my gosh, they'll have that aha moment, and it'll just be one step along their journey of where they're going to go.
Yeah.
And you're just part of that, and you're contributing to all of that. And so,
yeah, that's what I was really excited about in hearing your story, because even with my podcast, I'm like, I haven't really picked a direction. I'm not sure like what I really want to do with this yet. But I'm like, wow, if somebody hears your story and has that feeling like, oh my God, me too,
mm-hmm.
And they feel less lonely in the world, and they feel like, what, this person did it, and this is how they felt empowered. I can follow in those steps. Like somebody was there before me.
Mm-hmm.
That made me feel really excited.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Emma. Wow, how great was that? Thank you again, Heidi, for sharing your story and for being vulnerable and for connecting with us. I'm so positive that there is someone out there who just really needed to hear what you have to say, and I so honor your courage for choosing your passions and cultivating your strengths. Some of my favorite takeaways were the steps you can take to overcome your fear and move forward with what you want to create by starting with you and making sure that you're getting everything you need to support yourself. I'd highly recommend this simple exercise for everyone, and that's to make a list of everything that really lifts you up, that energizes you and makes you feel full of life, and explore ways of making these things a part of your daily practice and self-care rituals. It's one of the greatest ways to help you get into the practice and routine of actively choosing you every single day. If you'd like to learn more about Heidi, you can find her information as well as links to the books mentioned in this episode in the show notes section on theprismaticlife.com, as well as on the Prismatic Life and the Prismatic Academy on Facebook. Also, if you haven't done so already, and if it feels right to you, please be sure to leave a rating or review either on iTunes or Stitcher. It really helps with visibility and creates greater opportunities for others who are searching for this kind of information to be available to them. You really can have a direct influence on changing people's lives, and I'm glad that this platform gets to serve others in that way. As always, I'm so grateful for you and happy that you're a part of our community, and I look forward to connecting with you guys next time. Cheers, everyone.